Something that is quite topical currently at the planning stage for Rail Baltica is, of course, educating the Baltic societies on the role of developing high-speed infrastructure and the macroeconomic impact that creates, because oftentimes it is viewed merely as a burden on national budgets rather than for the multiplier effects that this investment, long-term investment, creates. So in your experiences, what are some of the valuable and efficient tactics to educate the society, and what has been your experience in this regard? Maybe we could start with Dominic, as you've probably been involved with multiple public consultations to garner support for the projects you've been involved with.
You mean educating the politics, educating the...
Well, the society at large, also politicians. What are the communication messages and tactics? Philip, you want to chip in while Dominic is contemplating?
If you look at what's happening in France, that I know a little bit, is that you have, when you build a high-speed rail line, you go through a lot of process which are extremely complicated because people are always quite a bit nervous, and there is this principle which was at the heart of the discussion when the high-speed rail project in the UK, not in my backyard. I'm in favor of high-speed rail, but not if it comes close to my house. So I think there are a lot of things that has been done with the associations, with the NGOs. You need to organize a lot of seminars, and I'm sure that Catherine Trotman did the same for the high-speed rail, which is going now to Strasbourg. You have to be careful because suddenly, for I would not call it strange reasons, you can be in big trouble. It has happened for some animals when you discover the track goes through a part in the country, and then can destroy some kind of insects, and you can be in a big mess. So I think for this kind of project, you really need to spend a lot of time presenting the project, showing the interest of the project, and that is the important thing. And what has been shown on the success of when you have a high-speed line is fantastic, because you renovate the railway station, you have the commercial centers, what you showed in your presentation. This is extremely interesting for the people, but people are always a bit nervous because when there are new things, at the very beginning, people don't like new things. It took quite a lot of time to have those systems, and some countries are still quite reluctant on high-speed rail, and it's not been so easy to have a lot of high-speed rails in the world. That's part of the problem that we are having.
Oscar, what about your insights?
Well, yeah, we are trying to win the hearts of the public and make sure that the public understands our intentions, and there are a few ways of how to deal with that. We have to really deal with real data and make sure that wider audience is feeling associated with the project as such. And of course, that's why I also was mentioning in my presentation that the only way how to deal with such a complex issues, with such a complex urban planning issues, you have to work with integrated planning process, because that's a platform that brings together everyone and makes sure that everybody is getting the confidence in a project. And I think these kind of strategies have been employed in France greatly. It took many years to make sure that such investments are feasible, that such investments are ecologically and urbanly sound. So I think we simply have to try, and that's what we are trying to do, is to bring that kind of planning culture also to places like Baltic countries and Latvia, Estonia, etc. I think that's the only way.
Thank you. And Dominic, the French experience?
But
this garnering support in the society. I mean, you have been involved with the entire development of the TGV network. It must have been.
It is what Philippe Citron has said. That is, we had a very bad experiment with what was called TGV Méditerranée, where that is high-speed line number 5 from Valence to Marseille. In the first step, the high-level politicians were very supportive of the project, and once we started to work to know the layout, precise layout of the line, so there has been some contestation, demonstrations, and then the political people said, "Oh, you are not doing the right way." And what has been decided after the TGV Méditerranée, I think that's a good decision, to have a public debate at the early stage of the project. And that's not the final public inquiry for the expropriation and so on. That's a public debate at the beginning of the project. Of course, you have already carried out some feasibility studies, and the real question say, do we go further or no? Is it yes or no? And everybody is there, that is local inhabitants, politicians, associations, and so on. And really, we can hear whether there is a support of the project or not support of the project. And that's much better to have a project which fails at the public debate, saying, "Oh, we don't want that project," instead of having 5-6 years of studies and then at the end of the day, the project which is rejected. So it has been decided after TGV Méditerranée. It has been implemented for the first time for TGV Rhin-Rhône, that is high-speed line number 7. Of course, it has lengthened the duration of the studies of about 1 year, but really it has secured the process. And which means that if we have a look on the time needed between the decision and the opening, for the first high-speed line, the decision took place in April 74, and the first part of the high-speed line has been opened in September 81, that is 7 years and a half. Now we are at almost 11, 12 years between the initial push and the opening of the line. That's not only the public debate, that's other debates, but some information about how it works.
All right. Thank you. Let's take the question on real estate. I mean, there's experts in this panel. Clearly, there are different dynamics involved when the high-speed infrastructure is built. It was mentioned several times, the upgrade of dilapidated neighborhoods, some process of gentrification that usually takes place in areas which rise up as infrastructure connects those parts. So maybe, Oskar, you could shed your views on how real estate, especially around the station or reachable from stations, develops as high-speed rail infrastructure or other infrastructure for that matter is developed.
I think we should keep in mind that the situations in each country are actually quite different from each other, and the planning culture also is quite different from each other. So from that perspective, we cannot really generalize. Nevertheless, when we look at the case study of Riga, for instance, we should become aware that it is more complex, most probably, than any other city around the Baltic Sea, simply because it has not only a planning challenge what we are looking at, but we are simultaneously also looking at heritage protection, which means that the whole city center is actually protected. And that's a double challenge. And for this, to achieve this kind of balance between what we call bipolar planning principle between planning and protection, we have to really, as I said earlier, we have to work with really complicated and complex planning issues. So, and once we have such a documentation, then it's much easier also for investors, for investors also to see clear rules of how certain things should be developed. And I think that's something we should still could see some improvement, at least in the case of Riga.
Dominic, you had the example of Lyon station area development. Any other good examples from the French experience?
Yes, beyond Lyon, Lille, but it has already been mentioned.
The Netherlands, they have reviewed, they have modernized all their railway stations at the same time. That was also very interesting to see how they are now organizing themselves for high-speed rail projects, and especially for Thalys, and there will be some Eurostar going to Amsterdam as well. But it's also a very good way when you have this kind of project of renovation, of launching a big renovation program. And they did for all the big stations at the same time.
Okay, let's take a slightly more technical question, a question regarding when you plan high-speed infrastructure, which extends over several years, is it correct or is it wise to select the highest and most advanced solution for signaling and communication rather than sticking with something that's proven? Let's say in 10 years when Rail Baltica is commissioned, shall we already now aim for the highest level ERTMS and GSMR, or shall we kind of factor in used technologies but proven?
This is an extremely difficult question. I think you could get a different answer from if you ask the question to an infrastructure manager, an operator, or a rail supplier. But I think that it's better to stick with proven solutions. If you look at what's happening for ERTMS level 3, starting in some parts of Europe, it goes quite slowly. That would be my advice at this stage. But maybe there's a different opinion from maybe if you have asked on expertise, but sometimes proven solutions is the best solution. I don't know what the coordinator, Mr. Karelvin, says about this, but he's also saying that the GSMR will be obsolete by 2023. That's what they say. But at this stage, I would advise to stick with proven solutions. But this is a kind of thing that can be also discussed at high levels with our members and the UNICIT persons when you are ready to have these kind of discussions.
Dominic, you have anything to add?
As Philippe Citroën says, that's always a difficult point. There is the example of Crossrail, which is the big east-west new line below London, joining Liverpool Street on the east towards Paddington on the west. The question was, which signaling system do we choose? They wanted the ATO, that is automatic train operation. That is, there is still a driver, but traction and braking are done automatically by the signaling system. Presently, it formally doesn't exist in ETCS. It exists in urban signaling system, CBTC, and the choice taken by Crossrail project has been, I choose the proven system, with an argument which is perfectly understandable, that is, Crossrail is a £15 billion project. I can't afford to be dependent on a £15 billion project of a signaling system which costs £75 million. That is
almost nothing in comparison.
Less than 1% of the cost of the project, and to be perhaps the pilot line of that new system. So I choose an existing system which works. And for that, Crossrail had to request a formal derogation to the European Commission. It has been granted, but that's a good example where Crossrail has chosen a proven system. On the other hand, due to the fourth railway package, Rail Baltica project will be forced to submit to the European Railway Agency what they want to implement for ETCS on the project. That is, which version, which national particular rules, and so on, and which are the operational rules, to ensure that interoperability will be achieved.
Thanks. Oscar, a question for you. In your view, which city along Rail Baltica route is currently most advanced in terms of overall planning? And I reckon it's not a question of overall planning within the auspices of the Rail Baltica project, but maybe let's expand in terms of transport infrastructure planning, in your view.
To my opinion, as I was mentioning earlier, we still should look at the examples that Finnish partners are providing us, because it's really about the similar scale, similar ambition on the regional level. It's about most probably similar mentality. So I wouldn't look too far away. I would simply take the best experience they have had and maybe look some other examples.
Okay. Philippe, a question to you. Are you satisfied with the pace and level of innovation development for rail transport as opposed to road transport?
Well, there's been let's say, in the past 2 years, a lot of pressure on the automated cars. So there's a major lobbying activities in Brussels, and there's been also, it has been discussed this morning on the Hyperloop. They are making a fantastic commercial promotion of the Hyperloop. So personally, I think that those lobbyings are excellent. But I don't think that it's because you have an automated cars or electric car or electric bus that you are going to solve the congestion that you have in big cities. But it's there, and I know that the Commission is extremely interested to find money to support those activities. On our side, it's true that I have the feeling that our members are now launching a lot of things on digitalization at the level of UNIFE. We have a digitalization platform. I know that the operators and the infrastructure managers are doing the same, but the only thing that I would say is that there are too many platforms sometimes in Brussels, and sometimes it would be good to have the same platforms, because in terms of digitalization, there are so many things that you can put inside the digitalization concept that sometimes it's also important to have priorities in which direction you go. Cybersecurity, for example, data, big data. So I think on our side there are a lot of things being done by the sector, but there is still a necessity to have priorities. But we understood the threat, and that for us we have to react and to be extremely, to know that the other sectors will not wait for us. So for us it's time really to deliver, and that's why Shift Rail is a very interesting tool, because it puts pressure on the sector to deliver things quickly. But the other sectors are doing things extremely quickly.
Okay. To put that in a historical context, Dominic, you have seen 40 years of railway innovation and railway development. So do you regard railway industry as hyper-conservative or very open to innovation? Or maybe that innovation is driven only by competitive pressures of innovation in other modes of transport?
I am not sure that presently railways innovate at the speeds which is what is expected by the market. But on the other hand, the fact that ETCS is a good example. We want a unique system for all Europe. The idea is bright, but to implement that, it takes time, because there has been a first set of specification, then a second set, then a third set, and we still discover that even with these different sets of specification, there are still interpretation which is possible. So there are two strengths, if you want. We want to go for more innovation. On the other hand, to harmonize the way of working of railways in Europe, and that's the mission of the European Commission, and it's necessary. It takes a lot of energy. And all this energy which is there is not elsewhere. And well, that's a balance between two.
Thanks. Any final questions from the audience as we are wrapping up the final plenary session of today? Anyone?
I think the only thing I would like to say that for Rail Baltica is fantastic as it's a green field. Then you will be able to put pressure on the suppliers on us and to get new tools, modern tools, and to put the pressure on the digitalization platform and those kind of things. I think it's fantastic for you to take advantage of the fact that you are building a new system in this part of Europe.
But to write properly the tender and invitation document, you need to know exactly how you will operate your railway. As long as you don't know how you will operate your railways, there will be hole in your tender documents. Any final remarks, Oscar? Wishes to Rail Baltica project?
Well, I think it's a fantastic project, and I think it's one of unique opportunities that happens in a couple of decades. So the only thing we have to keep in mind that next generations are going to judge of us of how we are, because big question is always a how, not what. How we are doing things, how we are implementing things. Can we learn something from the process we have generated? So I think if we will manage to make this little shift and to understand that it's not purely technical and transportation challenge, that actually it's about cities that we have inherited from somebody that had made us or present these beautiful cities, then we should be able to succeed.
Madam Trautmann?
Microphone is there.
Microphone?
Thank you. It's not a question, but I just want to say that in our corridor, North Sea Baltic, the work on the urban nodes will be really the way to show how corridors can be test beds to deploy innovation. That's why ERTMS is so important. But we want also work on railway stations as platform of services. And see with this cooperation between Baltic cities, we have some results presented in our forum for regions, as we have a forum for ports. So this is also very important because ports are working on ITS solutions in the gestion of containers, traffic, and all services. And I think that the comparison between modes, if I look even on inland waterways, we are going quicker than railways. So for the moment, if we want to have a real common effect and benefit between modes and transfer, for example, on platforms, we need to go in the same speed. So this is very important to say and to know. We said it to the Commissioner that for the next step, if we want to work on mobility as a service, this is very important to look on this question of digitalization. So this will be a priority for the next month. And for the new work plans, we will have a focus on new energies, environment, but also on the digitalization and the consequences for new activities and benefits we can have through these new services. Because for the Baltic states, and we could see that, we need to find the way to create added value, not just for transit. Transit is not sufficient. It's how transit can also give occasion to create new added value. So this will be one of the topics on which we will work. It's not just typically taken in the CBA analysis, but perhaps in the next step, because this is a common reflection with ports, for example, to know how we can do, because the more transit traffic we have, the less sometimes we can find as benefits, and especially also contest from population, because seeing freight crossing cities and quarters is not always so funny. So this will be a next step. So I wanted just to express this remarks, because we need the same level of very high-level experience as you could show. And thank you, Kaspers. You are brilliant in
Yes,
the...
he is brilliant.
Yes. So I think we can applaud Kaspers.
Well, yes. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you to the audience. Thank you, Madam Trautmann, for an excellent summary. And I now have the privilege of giving word to Barbara Rubesse to conclude our most interesting day of panel sessions.